Imagine waking up more than 3,400 years ago. No electricity, no cars, no modern technology, only the rising sun over the desert, the sound of workers beginning their day, and the endless flow of the Nile River, the force that made one of the greatest civilizations in human history possible. This is Needam, and the year is around Pichiwari 50 BCE. He wakes up inside a mud-brick townhouse in an ancient Egyptian settlement. For many people living in Egypt at this time, a home like this would be considered a luxury. It has several rooms, a place for the family to gather, and enough comfort to separate Needam's family from the struggles faced by ordinary laborers. But this is not a palace. Needam is not a prince. He is simply the son of a man with one of the most respected professions in ancient Egypt, a scribe. The day begins with breakfast. There is bread, onions, dates, sometimes fish, and something that may surprise people today, beer. Yes, even a teenager in ancient Egypt could drink beer, but this was not the same as modern beer. In ancient Egypt, beer was a daily necessity. It was often safer than drinking untreated water, because the brewing process reduced harmful microbes. It also provided energy, nutrients from grains, yeast, and valuable calories. For many workers, beer was not just a drink, it was part of their wages. A person might receive payment in grain, oil, and beer. In this world, beer helped fuel an entire civilization, but above everything else, there was the Nile. Without the Nile River, Egypt would have been nothing more than endless desert. Most of the land receives almost no rainfall. The country is surrounded by dry, unforgiving sands. Yet along the river exists a narrow strip of fertile land where millions of people live. Every year, water travels hundreds of kilometers from the Ethiopian highlands, flowing north into Egypt. When the Nile floods, it covers the fields. At first, it looks destructive, but when the water disappears, it leaves behind rich black soil filled with nutrients. This natural cycle allows farmers to grow wheat, barley, and other crops. The Egyptians understood one simple truth: the Nile was not just a river, it was life itself. Before leaving home, Needam prepares himself for the day. He wears a clean white linen kilt. In ancient Egypt, fine linen was more than clothing. It was a symbol of status. Clean, bright fabric showed that a person had access to wealth and resources. He also applies black eye paint around his eyes. To modern people, it may look like decoration, but for Egyptians, it had practical benefits. It helped reduce the intense glare of the desert sun and offered protection from dust and insects. Inside the house, religion surrounds every part of daily life. Small shrines, protective amulets, figures of household gods. Among them are gods like Bes, the protector of families and children, and Taweret, the goddess believed to guard mothers and newborns. For ancient Egyptians, the world of humans and the world of gods were connected. The divine was always present. Needam's family lives in Setmat, meaning the place of truth. Today, this location is known as Deir el-Medina. But this is not an ordinary village. It is a carefully controlled settlement built by the Egyptian government. Here lived the skilled craftsmen who created the magnificent tombs of the pharaohs in the Valley of the Kings. These workers were not random villagers. They were specially selected. They knew royal secrets. They knew where kings would be buried. Because of this, they lived separately from ordinary communities and were closely protected. And among these important people was Needam's father, a royal scribe. In ancient Egypt, being a scribe meant much more than knowing how to write. A scribe controlled information. He measured land, calculated grain supplies, recorded taxes, managed building materials, organized workers, and tracked the daily activities of the community. Every worker's attendance was recorded. Every missing day required an explanation. Even unusual reasons could be accepted. For example, brewing beer could sometimes be considered a valid reason to stay home. Needam's father also manages tools used by craftsmen. Some are made from bronze, but bronze is a valuable material. To create bronze, two metals are needed, copper and tin. Egypt had access to copper, but as demand increased, it began importing more from distant regions, including the Mediterranean island, that would later give copper its name, Cyprus. However, the greater challenge was tin. Egypt had very little nearby, so tin traveled thousands of kilometers through early international trade networks. It came from distant regions of Central Asia. including areas that are now Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. Egypt was not alone. The Hittites, the Mycenaean Greeks, Babylon, all depended on the same global exchange of resources. The ancient world was already connected, not by technology, but by trade. At this time, iron was still a mystery. Humans had not yet mastered the ability to produce iron efficiently. Most iron available to Egyptians came from meteorites. They called it the metal of the sky. Because it came from the heavens, it was incredibly rare, sometimes more valuable than gold. Centuries later, the famous dagger found in the tomb of King Tutankhamun would reveal that it was made from this extraordinary material, a weapon created from metal that once traveled through space. Needam dreams of becoming like his father, a scribe. Only a small percentage of Egyptians could read and write. Knowledge was power, and writing offered one of the few paths to a higher social position without becoming a soldier. But the journey was difficult. Needam studies at scribal school. He practices writing on broken pottery and wooden boards because papyrus is too expensive for students. He does not begin with the beautiful hieroglyphs carved into temples. Instead, he learns hieratic, a faster writing system used for everyday records and administration. For years, he must memorize hundreds of signs. The training is strict. Teachers use discipline and fear to motivate students. They describe the difficult lives of farmers working under the hot sun, soldiers facing war, workers suffering through exhausting labor. Their message is clear. The life of the educated is a better life, but today is not just another ordinary day. A great celebration is beginning. The Festival of the Valley. Families leave their homes and travel across the Nile to the western cemetery areas. They gather near the tomb chapels of their ancestors. But this is not a quiet event of sadness. It is a celebration of life. Families bring food. They wear jewelry. Musicians play. People dance. They drink and celebrate because they believe joy and connection can bring them closer to the gods and to those who came before them. To the Egyptians, death was not the end. It was another stage of existence. As the sun sets over the Nile, Needam looks across a civilization built by millions of people. Farmers who transformed desert into farmland. Craftsmen who created eternal monuments. Scribes who preserved knowledge. Workers who built an empire that would survive thousands of years. The pyramids and temples may be the symbols we remember today. But Egypt was not created only by pharaohs. It was created by ordinary people. People who worked. People who dreamed. People who loved. People like Needam, and their stories still echo along the eternal river of Egypt.